historically look at the government, they don't have any money, right? So they are looking for pools of money to tap into. And so that is an absolute valid pool. But so far, historically, we've been able to kind of keep them at bay. So, yeah.
Now, but then there's a longer impact of something of what this election is going to be, and I think it's going to be even really more important than the taxes on the life insurance, and that is there's two tax laws that are set to expire at the end of 2025. Now, the first one, in the Inflation Reduction Act, there was subsidies for the affordable healthcare premiums. That is set to expire. Now, that could raise premiums up by as much as 50%. Now, this is one thing I find interesting. This is part of the bill called the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, Cameron, if the government spends money on subsidies or helping us pay our bills, does that lower inflation?
No, that kicks it up.
It kicks it up?
Absolutely.
It doesn't reduce inflation?
Not at all.
Well, how about this, Cameron?
Not at all.
What if we don't even have the money to give these subsidies, so we borrow additional money to pay for these subsidies? Now, does that lower inflation?
Not at all. It's like my kids, whether they have money or don't have money, they spend regardless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to me, this is when they put these terms on here that really are more like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It just gets a little frustrating. Now, if they were to keep those subsidies going for the next 10 years, that's going to range between 300 and 400 billion to additional debt over the next 10 years. Okay. Now, also, there is the Tax Cut and Jobs Act 2017. Now, that is set to expire in 2025 as well. And there is a lot going on in that bill. For one, it had increased the standard deduction. It had lowered marginal tax rate. It had capped the sales tax and state income tax deduction, increased the child care tax credit, increased the estate tax exemption, also created a new deduction for business owners of 20% of the net income. And this also lowered the corporate tax rate down to 21%. Except for the corporate tax rate, all the other ones are set to expire. Now, with the Republicans controlling the House and the Senate, and the House, I would expect that these bills to be continued in some fashion.
Yeah.
Now, also a note, because this isn't a new law, it's going to be one option is to extend it. They don't need the 60 votes in the Senate, so they don't need a super majority to get this through. So who knows what they're going to stick on here. But I mean, also Trump had mentioned no tax on overtime.
Yeah.
No tax on tips. That all sounds great, but the problem is we're still spending more money than we're taking, right? So I don't know how we're going to afford these or pay for these tax cuts. I got a couple different estimates on what if we were to extend these tax cuts for another 10 years, but it was really in between 4 and 4.6 billion. Okay, so if we were to extend that and the subsidies, we're adding about another 5 billion over the next 10 years. Now, one thing I want to keep in mind, like $1 trillion it's really hard to grasp.
Yeah.
But, maybe this will help. Let's say you had $1 million in a bucket. You would need 1 million buckets. Like you need 1 million to equal 1 trillion. And we're talking about 5 trillion. And you know what we're not talking about is we already have a budget deficit. When they present the annual budget, they're already spending more money than it's coming in. And now we're going to add to that. Like, imagine if you were running your household and you took in 100 grand, be like, hey, we're going to spend 110. And then next year you do the same thing and you spend another over 110. We continue to get this deficit. And so what I'm concerned about, not as much today, but really the impact of this is going to have in the future. For one, with this subsidy, what if they discontinue it? Are people going to be able to pay their premiums? Or maybe they find a way to pay the premiums by taking money from somewhere else. So I think that will impact the economy in some way, as well as these. If we continue to add money to the deficit, I mean, I really don't. It's got to stop at some point, right? And how does the government raise money? Well, for one, they print it, okay, which is just creates inflation. They raise taxes, or they cut spending. And you know what I think is interesting? Everybody talks about the taxes, or we need to. Everybody needs to pay their fair share. Certain classes, or you're not paying enough. In fact, doing some of this research, I found the state of Washington wants to add an additional 2% to the capital gains tax to help pay for the homeless. We could say if you got a capital gain, you got more money than some of the other people.
You want to see the entire episode? Click here. If you want to learn how investors use infinite banking to increase their returns and lower their taxes, click here. If you want to see if infinite banking is for you and you have some questions, hop on a discovery call with us and one of our coaches. The link for that will be in the description.